Good evening and welcome to Business 7. Tonight we're talking about macroeconomics and the latest tendencies that shape the economy of Namibia. We'll see you just now.
Connection. It's in the human touch, the feeling of belonging. It inspires us and empowers us, creates clarity from complexity. It starts new conversations, unlocks the power of advice, and makes an impact on your life. At Alex Forbes, we pioneer insight to provide you with advice that connects your decisions of today to your impact tomorrow.
Before we kickstart the program by getting into the tendencies that shape the Namibian economy, we're going to take a look at the business highlights over the past week as compiled by Reuters.
Here's what's been making the business headlines in sub-Saharan Africa this week. Binance is stopping all transactions and trading in Nigeria's Naira amid a countrywide crackdown on cryptocurrency exchanges that authorities have blamed for feeding a black market for foreign exchange. Last week, Nigerian authorities detained two Binance senior directors on undisclosed charges. Also in Nigeria, Africa's richest man, Aliko Dangote, is planning to set up a new oil trading arm to help run crude and product supply for his new mega refinery in Lagos, according to 6 sources familiar with the matter. The 650,000 barrel per day refinery is set to redraw global oil and fuel flows, and the trading community is closely watching the way it will operate. Dangote did not reply to several requests for comment. Australia's Invictus Energy is hopeful that it will conclude a production sharing agreement with the Zimbabwean government within weeks to develop its Cabora Bassa project following years of delays, a non-executive director said on Thursday. Energy consultancy Wood Mackenzie has estimated that the project's Makuyu discovery was the second largest made in sub-Saharan Africa last year. Ethiopian Airlines has agreed to buy 8 Boeing 777-9 wide-body jets, with potential for 12 additional aircraft orders, the company said on Tuesday. Major airlines are flocking to fuel-efficient wide-body jets to keep operating costs down and cater to booming international travel demand. And finally, a UN official has warned that Africa will be $2.5 trillion short of the finance it needs to cope with climate change by 2030. UN Economic Commission for Africa chief economist Hanan Morsi told a conference in Zimbabwe's Victoria Falls that the continent attracts only 2% of global investments in clean energy, but that climate change is costing African countries 5% of GDP every year.
My colleague at NMH, Alketu Craig, also no stranger in the Biz 7 studio, spoke to the chief economist of Capricorn Asset Management, that's Floris Bergh, about the latest indicators of the economy in the country.
Welcome to another insightful edition of Business 7. My name is Ogito Craig, and today with me I have Mr. Floris Bergh, the chief economist for Capricorn Asset Management. He's here to help us to understand the recently announced national budget. Welcome, Floris, and tell us from the get-go, what are your general impressions of the budget?
The Namibian budget, very good, very fortunate confluence of circumstances, but in South Africa, not so good.
Oh, could you compare them a little bit for us?
Yeah, we look at normally a bit of a trajectory. We try and look forward, and it seems like the Namibian fiscal trajectory looks a lot more healthy than that of South Africa.
Okay.
They are subject to what we call, as economists, fiscal slippage, which is a deterioration of their fiscal position.
I see. Maybe you could expand a bit about our revenue side.
That is one of the positive areas that we've been very fortunate over the last 2 years, a very strong recovery in the SACU revenue source, which is about 1/3 of our total government income.
Okay.
So the outlook for this year is that we're going to receive about $29 billion Namibian dollars from the SACU pool,
okay,
which is much better than what was expected even to very recently. And that compares to last year's figure of 24. billion,
Excellent.
which compares to the previous year's figure of 14. So we went from 14 all the way to nearly 30.
And that's from the Southern African Custom Union?
Yes, the SACU for short.
So it's about business between the countries?
Yeah, it's based on international trade of the members of the SACU Union, which includes Botswana, South Africa, Namibia, Lesotho and Eswatini. Botswana is not a member of the CMA though, but they are a member of SACU. So yeah, trade plays a very big role. So what was helping SACU was the big commodity boom that we have had since 2020.
Excellent. And you say that accounts for about a third. What are the other 2/3?
The biggest ones are personal income tax and VAT.
Aha.
So those two sources of income also did quite well the last 2 years, surprisingly so. Because in the end, it looks like our nominal GDP growth of the last 2 years is going to be average of 15%.
Wow.
So that is a very sharp and fortunate recovery in our growth situation.
You mentioned tax, and I'd like us just to touch on the tax thresholds because that will touch everybody's pockets.
Yeah, in the Namibian budget was actually, in comparison to the last few budgets, there was quite a number of tax announcements, of which the threshold of 100,000 makes quite a big difference to people's pockets. So people need to have a look out for the new tax tables, which will be which already in circulation, but that ought to make quite a big difference to households. And then the outlook is for the corporate income tax rate to be lowered to 28% over the next 2 years, I believe.
Oh.
Yeah. So, but what negates a lot of that positiveness from the corporate tax is the 10% dividend tax, which is being introduced, which raises the effective tax rate again. So, but nevertheless, there's also the new economic zone policy that's being promulgated, which will lower tax in those regions to 20%.
Okay.
And then 20% as well to some small and medium enterprises, which are below a certain threshold of turnover. Then they will also now have a 20% flat rate. So yeah, those are some of the things that come to mind.
Quite a few changes. And before we leave that aspect, let's just talk a little bit about the pension increases.
The deductible side.
Well, I understand that pension contributions from government have increased a little bit, a few $100 extra.
Oh, I think that's part and parcel of the bit of increase in the wage bill generally, which could make up for the reason that the wage bill is increasing by 8% year on year for the coming fiscal year.
Okay.
But as far as I can gather, that general increase to civil servants was announced was 5%. So the extra 3 could be to take account of other contributions that needs to rise in conjunction with that. Also, maybe there will be a bit of growth in the headcount.
So that brings us nicely to the expenditure side of the budget. Could you give us some insight as to how that's changed?
Yeah, what I would have liked to see was more discipline on the expenditure side in conjunction with the good fortune on the revenue side. That could have actually made our fiscal trajectory even more positive. But yeah, the government's got 90 billion Namibian dollars at its disposal for the coming fiscal year, which is an increase of about 13%, I believe. So expenditure is rising a little bit. So the purse strings have been loosened, which will be a positive for economic growth.
Yes.
So as long as it's kept at prudent levels, then it should be all right. The one thing that is now on the spending side is becoming an issue is the interest bill.
Yes.
So as your debt rises in numbers, your interest bill also increases. So it's determined by the debt levels, but also by interest rate levels.
Yes.
So both in South Africa and Namibia, the interest bill is becoming the new wage bill. You used to talk about the wage bill in the past.
Yes.
Now we're talking about the debt issues.
Yes, yes.
So in Namibia again, the interest bill is about 13% of revenue.
Okay.
In South Africa, it's now touching 20%.
Wow.
So in South Africa, there is a concern. It is too big,
Yeah.
and obviously it gets a life of its own.
Yes.
So it's not something you can decide, well, we cut it this year because interest needs to be paid. It's a statutory obligation.
So it's about servicing the debt
Yes.
rather than repaying the debt.
Yeah. So when we talk about interest bill, it's basically about the cost of debt. So that you can only bring it down over time when you limit the deficits, which will limit the debt built up, which will limit the interest bill.
Okay, I see. And
So-
how does this tie into our general stability and macroeconomic growth?
Look, I think the Namibian fiscal trajectory, like I say, is much more healthy than SA. The outlook is better. Our economy is growing, whereas the South African economy is sputtering along the zero line.
Yeah.
Due to all the issues there. I don't think we need to go into that. But I think if the fiscal trajectory can stay on this course, we in the investment world,
Yeah.
where I come from, we quite like to see more focus on regaining the investment grade rating for our debt.
Yes.
Because that will lower the interest rate structure, not only for government, but in the economy wide.
Okay.
Because other borrowers in the economy need to compete with the interest on offer from the government.
Yeah.
So the government debt is obviously supposed to be the risk-free debt. So if you want to go make a risk-free investment at a very good interest rate, you buy government bonds. And if you are confronted with an alternative from a private business or an entity or a parastatal that wants to place debt,
Yeah.
then you compare the two and say, okay, but you being more risky than government, you must pay up a bit.
Yes. Better return.
Yeah, so if the interest rate structure as a whole can come down, it benefits private sector greatly,
Okay.
which makes funding cheaper and more economic plans more viable.
Okay. Tell me, which were the infrastructure spending highlights? What are we doing with our money?
Yeah, the one that stands out to me is the 6.6 billion that's been set aside for the rail network.
Oh.
Yeah, it's I think it's over the 3 years though, but I think that's a key one for us to get right.
Yeah.
Is the rail, because the harbour has been benefiting, or harbours have been benefiting greatly due to the chaos in SA harbours. Also the blockages in the Suez Canal.
Yeah.
Some ships have now been forced to sail around the South African coast.
Yeah.
So the harbour is coming alive, so to speak.
Yeah.
But it seems like we need more reliable rail to amplify the benefits.
Yes.
And to get some of the heavy traffic off the road
Off the roads,
infrastructure.
yes.
So I think the rail one stands out, but there's also been quite a bit of provision for other things like building schools and hospitals and the basic social amenities that's so necessary.
In previous years, there was a lot of talk about civil service reform. I understand that we're in an election year now, so has that been put on hold for now, or is there any progress in terms of the wage bill which you mentioned earlier?
Ogito. The wage reforms as such, or the civil service reforms, I don't think, I'm not so on top of what is actually happening within the, let's say, grading structures or performance on your pay and
Yes.
that sort of policy, which is obviously necessary,
Yes.
which one assumes is in place.
Yes.
So the wage bill increases as such are largely just on the basis of what we have currently.
Okay.
So yes, I think once we have got a new political dispensation, then I think that these inner workings of the civil service
Yes.
will obviously also have to be reviewed and replanned and re-rated, and we hope so.
Yeah.
Every day, You make choices that make you legendary. Journey together with us on the path to securing your legacy as a member of the League of Legends. With the Select Platinum Bundle Fee Premium Bank offering, you will access tools that will enable you to thrive. If you earn 850,000 Namibian dollars per annum or more, you can apply for this offering today via bankvinted.com.na for only 447 Namibian dollars per month. Bank Vinted, a member of Capricorn Group.
Nigerians are struggling with a cost of living crisis following the introduction of bold but very unpopular economic reforms last year. Angela Okumodo from Reuters filed this report.
Blessing Joseph weaves bags, sandals, and jewelry to earn enough money to feed her son and send him to school. But since November, amid a cost of living crisis in Nigeria, she has fallen on hard times. Customers have stopped coming, and she and her son routinely go to bed hungry.
Like today, it was the last food. That's what I made yesterday, this morning. My son took it to school. I don't even have any in my pot now. I don't even have any to eat. I'm not even worried about that. I'm just thinking of what he will eat if he comes back.
Joseph is among millions struggling in Africa's biggest economy. The crisis has deepened since President Bola Tinubu introduced bold but unpopular economic reforms after assuming office last May. The naira currency has slumped to record lows and inflation has hit record highs. At a market in Lagos, fish seller Afusat Agosu is arranging her last set of dried fish. A day before, she went to stock up on produce, but left as the price had increased for the fourth time in just 2 weeks.
Before, a carton of this fish was sold for between 5,000 and 6,000 naira. Now it is sold for 40,000 naira.
Tinubu, who campaigned on a renewed hope slogan, inherited an economy that was already struggling with record debt, high unemployment, and low oil output. Subsidies had drained government finances, and power shortages had restricted growth. Tinubu removed fuel subsidies and foreign currency controls. His administration has also announced handouts of cash, grains, fertilizer, and seeds to vulnerable groups. However, Nigeria's labor unions have said that's not enough. They protested last month and have threatened to shut down the country as they demand a tenfold rise in the minimum wage. On Thursday, the government started national consultations on a new monthly minimum wage. Nigeria's problems have also rippled through company boardrooms. Foreign companies like Procter & Gamble will stop manufacturing in Nigeria, while drug makers GSK and Bayer have said they will contract third parties to distribute their products. That's in part due to tough operating conditions and the naira slump. Africa's biggest telecoms operator MTN posted a big fall in full-year profits, cited naira devaluation, which also prompted soap maker PZ Cussons to issue a profit warning.
Staying with Nigeria, now Nigerians want Shell to clean up after themselves following years of oil production in the Niger Delta or the Niger Delta, and that's of course before Shell totally divests from the region. David Doyle from Reuters filed this report.
I'm appealing to the wonderful shareholders of Shell all over the world.
Shell may be leaving Nigeria's oil-rich Niger Delta, but communities in the region, like that of King Godwin Bebe Okpabi, paramount ruler in Igale, want their energy major to clean up before it goes.
Those dividends they get from the investment in Shell is blood money.
Shell has sold its onshore assets in Nigeria to a consortium. Over the years, spills caused by theft, vandalism and operational issues have been costly for the company, both in terms of repairs and court cases. People in the Delta, like Ayabakuro Warda, a farmer in Bayelsa State, say decades of oil exploration have ruined farms and rivers. She says the farmland she shares with her sister hasn't yielded any crops in years.
If they live like that without healing the soil, how do we survive? Because we depend on farming and fishing, and all the lakes and all the farms has been destroyed by crude.
Environmental groups like the Center for Research on Multinational Corporations are urging Nigerian authorities to ensure Shell safely dismantles its old infrastructure, or pays to remove them before its exit. Shell did not respond to requests for comment. It has long maintained that the spills are mostly due to oil theft and interference with pipelines. And it said, when announcing its $2.4 billion sale, that the responsibility for dealing with the spills would pass to Renaissance, the buying consortium. Lai Fatona, vice chairman of ND Western, one of the 5 companies in the consortium, did not comment directly on the issue or how much it had budgeted to clean up, but did say that the grouping would follow the country's legal requirements. The head of the Nigerian Upstream Regulatory Commission has said that oil majors would need to show compliance with rules on decommissioning before being given consent to leave. He did not name Shell and declined to comment on whether the oil major or other companies had complied with the rules. Nigeria's government has indicated that it would not block the Shell deal. Meanwhile, in the Delta, it's those like fisherman Chidioma Timothy who say they've been left cleaning up. He says he owns this lake, which he would fish or rent out, but that he has not made any money from it since an oil spill in 2019.
I decided to enter the water to move the dirty bit by bit, so that let me see whether I can have space to do my fishing.
However, he says you can still detect the smell of crude oil in the air, and the fish that are caught here can't be eaten.
Let me show you something.
Don't worry. Next time, I check nice.
Thanks, but it's okay. FNB Insurance checks nicer.
At FNB Insurance, we provide cover for all your valuables, from your phone to your laptop to your car. FNB Insurance. You value it, we cover it. T's and C's apply.
Thank you for joining Business at 7. We'll see you again next week. Please take care. We're playing out with a Reuters report about a road project, very controversial one, in Kenya, and the controversy stems from the fact that this road will run through a national park. Goodbye.
Conservationists are raising concern over a proposed road project that is expected to go through Kenya's Aberdare National Park. The construction of the Mau Mau Road project would disrupt the Aberdare's ecosystem and communities that rely on it for water and hydroelectric power generation, according to Christine Mwangi, a Worldwide Fund Kenya representative.
Cost to the environment will this road be done? The Aberdare is a critical water catchment for the local community and the people living in Nairobi.
Others say they're worried about the impact on thousands of elephants in the area, as well as the potential for collisions with wildlife. Local farmers have mixed opinions. This one says she doesn't mind if the road goes through the park, as long as she can access markets. Another says the park route would only benefit the tourism sector and not farmers. Some conservationists, such as Steve Atella with the Conservation Alliance of Kenya, say an alternative route should be considered.
We are not against the road. What we want is we want the alternative road to be considered, because the alternative road is much more viable, it connects more households, it opens up opportunities for economic growth by connecting small little towns, and it facilitates movement of agricultural products.
Aberdare National Park is a popular tourist destination and is the location where the late Queen Elizabeth found out about her father's death.